Now, South Africans will have to brace themselves for electricity price increases in 2026 and 2027. And the increases will be higher than the tariff increases that were announced earlier this year. And this comes after the National Energy Regulator of South Africa entered into a settlement with Eskom. Now, Nersa made a mistake in determining the utilities revenue for the current and next 2 financial years. And Nersa is now giving Eskom an additional 54 billion rand over 3 years on top of the 1.2 trillion rand that it has already approved. Now, earlier this year, Eskom lodged a judicial review of Nersa's original determination, stating that the regulator had a shortfall of 107 billion rand, and that's on its determination. So to discuss this matter further, we joined virtually now by Executive Manager for Electricity at Nersa, Rhulani Mathebula. Mr. Mathebula, welcome to Morning Live, and thanks for speaking to us.
Morning, Sakina, and morning to your viewers.
So let's just start by confirming the Nersa settlement that was reached with Eskom in relation to errors that were made in the regulator's calculation in its 6th multi-year price determination.
Sakina, in the multi-year price determination that we had pronounced as the regulator in January of this year, which actually indicated that the price of electricity will be going up by 12.74% for this year and 5.6% for the 5.36% for 2026, as well as 6.19% for 2027. When we had shared the details of how we arrived at that decision to Eskom, going through the details, we picked up that the determination that we had actually made for 2026 and 2027, there were certain figures that we had not incorporated in that particular decision. So because obviously the Act pronounced that we cannot just review the decision that we had made, even Eskom cannot actually force us to do that. Eskom had to approach the court and had a judicial review on the decision that we had made. And the court could have decided to say it set aside this whole determination and have the process restarted, which will obviously take its course. However, we, as between us and Nersa, us and Eskom, we decided therefore to reach a settlement. And in the papers that were filed to the court, actually it indicated that Eskom had indicated that it had a shortfall of 107 billion based on the determination that we had actually pronounced on. However, it was willing to settle with us at 62 billion rand. And obviously, as a regulator, we have to maintain our own decision, or we need to take a decision without being influenced. So we couldn't just take the 62 billion settlement that Eskom was actually pronouncing. We had to go back to our numbers and look at what exactly did we miss when we pronounced the price increases for 26 and 27. And we realized that on the generation business, because the decision for this year, Sakina, had to be for the 3 entities of Eskom, which is National Transmission Company of South Africa, the distribution business of Eskom, as well as the generation business. So when all the prices were done properly and correctly for the distribution business as well as the transmission business, but there were certain figures that were actually omitted when we made the decision for generation. And that is where this 54 billion rand actually come from. And this, Sakina, results in an impact of 3.26% for the 2026 year and actually 2.64% for the 2027 year for the consumers.
And this is over and above what has already been determined as announced earlier this year.
That is true, Sakina. What we had announced for next year was actually 5.36%, and that means it now has to go up to 8.76%, and the year thereafter it will be at 8.83%, as in compared to the 6.19% that we actually announced earlier this year.
So, reading through some of the reports earlier this week, Mr. Mathebula, it was reported that, you know, this was almost like a secret settlement between Nersa and Eskom. So, firstly, how much of this payout will actually then be paid by the consumers, obviously through these higher tariffs that you've just announced? How much of that is going to be paid by the consumers, one? And two, were consumers consulted, and if not, why not?
Yeah, Sakina, the process in itself, when we had to pronounce on the decision, we went through a process of public consultation before we could make the decision that we pronounced in January 2025. So this is not necessarily a new determination. It was just a correction on the omission that we had actually done on the generation business. So it is not a review of the total determination that we had made on to Eskom, and hence it didn't go out to start a process afresh where we need to do public consultation and so forth. So actually, if we didn't omit those figures when we made our decision in January, the decision in January should have indicated that the 2026 price increase was not supposed to have been 5.39. It was supposed to actually be 8.76. And the price for 2027 should have been 8.83. That is what was supposed to have been the decision in January, if we didn't omit the numbers that I indicated we omitted for generation business.
So to that point, Mr. Mathebula, the fact that this actually has a significant impact on the consumer, you don't think that necessitates you going back, and even if you're not going on in a full consultation process again, but taking the public along in your confidence to say, listen, we made an error as Nersa that's going to have a material impact on the price that you pay for already unaffordable electricity. You didn't think that was important?
Yeah, Sakina, we believed that the process that we had embarked on in the past year when we did public consultation, actually it talked to the same thing, because this is obviously not a reassessment of an Eskom application. This was just a correction to add the numbers that we had omitted when we finalized the decision.
But so Mr. Mathebula, it's not an insignificant error on your part for which the consumer will now have to pay. So where in this equation, you speaking, Eskom, the two of you are coming to some form of settlement that is going to be paid by the consumer. So why was the consumer not involved in this entire discussion?
Yeah, Sakina, the process indicates that when we are to do a price determination, we need to do public consultation. But however, this judicial review process, it is not does not entail that it needs to first go back to the public for consultation as first. It allows that the two entities, based on the papers that have been filed by the court, can actually agree on a settlement, so that the court does not have to dictate that what process should actually be followed. And that is what we had actually done between ourselves and utility.
So when did you inform the consumer about this?
Obviously, what happens is that once we have a settlement, Sakina, it needs to be made first the order of court before you can actually communicate it. And hence you would see that we only managed to communicate this when we released our media statement a day before yesterday.
And of course, it's a fait accompli for the consumer. So the consumer will wholly be covering this, am I correct?
Obviously, all this allowable revenue, yes, it is covered by the user of the service. However, on our decision, Sakina, we have decided that we will not liquidate the whole 54 billion in this MYPD determination. It is only a portion of that 54 billion that we actually allowed Eskom to recover in this multi-year price determination.
So in terms of electricity costs that are already exorbitant, how is the consumer being protected here, Mr. Mathebula? Because if you look at Eskom and its costs, right, that they are trying to recover, you talk about the unbundling process and the cost inherent therein, which once again is passed on to the consumer. You look at mismanagement, you look at corruption that has over the years been synonymous with Eskom. You look at Medupi and Kusile alone, who've already had overruns in excess of 300 billion rand. So why should the consumer be burdened with paying for that again? What is Nersa's responsibility in making sure that the money that the consumer actually pays results in value for them in the end? You know, because it seems as though we are paying for Eskom's mismanagement, for the corruption. People got rich, they took monies out of Eskom, and yet we are paying for it.
Yeah, Sakina, based on the decision that we made at the regulator, it's not necessarily what Eskom had actually asked for. So Eskom make an application to the regulator to make a decision on what should be the allowable price of electricity in the coming years. And based on our prudent and rigorous assessment of those figures, which is the projected cost of producing a kilowatt of electricity for the country, we go through a rigorous process to determine what is prudent, what is fair. However, we do not only have a responsibility to protect the consumer, we also have a responsibility to ensure that the utility that provides the service remains sustainable to can continue providing that service. So it is the balancing act that we need to do as the regulator. I need to indicate that if we talk about exactly the 54 billion, actually what Eskom had put before the court was 107 billion. That was indicated as a shortfall that Eskom believed it was due to them. However, we could not prudently allow that 107 billion to be passed on to the consumers. And that, I believe, it's a role that as the regulator, we have to play to ensure that whatever is passed to the consumer, we can prove that it was prudent and it was fair to both entities. It keeps the entity going and it also protects the consumer from all the costs that we believe it's unjustified.
But Mr. Mathebula, it doesn't matter how you cloak this, because the consumer is paying for Eskom failures. And if Eskom had used the money that they have been awarded over the years, the South African consumer would not be paying as much for electricity as they are. Would you agree with me on that score?
The consumer is not paying for failure. So as the regulator, we do not pass through to consumers costs that are unjustified. So there are certain costs that Eskom would have wanted to recover from the consumers that we as the regulator, we have said, this is unjustified, this is not prudent, this is due to your own mismanagement as
Give us examples of that. Give us examples of that, Mr. Mathebula. Just give us examples of that.
Look, there is obviously we look at, based on what Eskom believes. Remember, the price determination, Sakina, it's a price of the future. So we're not looking at what is happening in the past. So what we do is we consider what actually should be the price of each and every service that Eskom and each and every item or service that Eskom needs to be able to continue providing electricity. At what price, and whether the price is it's a market value, is it justified, is it correct? And at times we do realize that this price does not correlate with the standard market price of this particular item, whether it's an asset or it's a price of the diesel consumption or the primary energy costs that Eskom would have put forward. We do our own analysis and we determine what we believe based on market costs, what do we believe is prudent.
Yeah, well, we have to leave it there, unfortunately, Mr. Mathebula, but thank you so much for your time. Rhulani Mathebula is the Executive Manager for Electricity at Nersa, speaking to us about this latest development with regard to Nersa and Eskom settlement on the 6-year multi-price determination revenue decision. And it means we're going to be paying more for electricity than was initially announced earlier in the year.